go. We're live. This is amazing.
It worked.
So excited to talk to you because, of course, we didn't get to chat when I was on the Switch for Good podcast. I spoke with your co-host, Alexandria, and I'm so in awe of what you do on Switch for Good, but also your personal story. And I think people are going to gain so much from learning more about you and your plant-based journey.
Oh, that's sweet. I'm sad I missed it, and she did a beautiful job interviewing you. And the last time I checked, I think you're in the top 15 or 20 of all time downloaded. And we've been at this for 4 years. So yeah, you really made a splash. People loved hearing your knowledge and your story. But I know Alexandra, she goes in with facts. So I'm sure there were a lot of really good facts and tidbits for people to take home and apply to their life. And that's awesome.
Yeah, I definitely love to nerd out. I was as a kid, I was that kid, like in a darkened room, reading with a book like 6 inches from my face, hence the glasses now. Like I was a deeply inactive child. So I'm always so in awe of athletes because it's just a very different sort of like mindset or thing that I don't think I embody whatsoever. I'm active, but I've never considered myself an athlete. And, one of the things that I find really interesting about your story is that, for so many athletes, we sort of hear, I just picked up the book, Carrie Soto is Back. And she talks at the beginning, she's like, as soon as she was a toddler, her dad put the tennis racket in her hand. And I think that's like such a common story, but like that wasn't your story. So
it wasn't.
How did you pick up cycling? What point in your life did you come to this sport?
Yeah, a little late, like very late, but not too late, apparently.
Not too late.
Right? That's the key right there. Well, I was 26 when I picked up the bike, and I picked up the bike in a very unconventional way. I was at the end of a healing journey from anorexia nervosa. It was about a 5-year battle and then about a 2-year recovery journey. The therapist that I was working with, who saved my life, who it took a while to get to, as it does for many of us. I was in treatment centers and inpatient, outpatient, single therapist, and just nothing was working. And at the end of the day, it's because I wasn't ready, right? Of course. But when I found this therapist, we got to work quickly. And I really appreciated that about her. She didn't want to go deep into my childhood and get all Freudian until later on, because I really was desperate and suffering and wanted action, so we dove right in, and she was a fantastic in the way she was a meditative type approach. And towards the very end, when I was much, much, much better and I was kind of integrating back into life and I was starting to work and have relationships that I could sustain, she said to me, Dotsie, I know that one of your goals when we started working together was to be able to move your body in a healthy way again. And she literally said to me, I know I'm not some kind of like Olympic athlete or anything, but you just want to be able to move healthfully. You like being outside and moving your body. I always have. And so I think we're ready to try that. So she said, I want you to pick something. I'm living out in LA by that point. So she's like, you could pick surfing, you could pick beach volleyball, it could just be anything. Just pick something that sounds attractive to you. And I chose the bike. And It was really for no other reason than I just kind of thought, well, I'm living in Venice. If I got a bike, I could ride at Pacific Coast Highway and into the mountains, and I would feel free, and which I hadn't felt for a long time in the confines of the eating disorder. And it was that little of thought was put into it. So I got a bike, and then 14 years later, I was on the Olympic podium. It's just still like, what? And she gets a kick out of it, this therapist, for sure. I don't think I would have done it without her saying, you need to choose something. So I'm glad I didn't choose beach volleyball, because I feel like I wouldn't have made it to the Olympics in that. Not tall enough. I'm not, yeah.
Although given that it's you, never say never. I'm pretty sure you would have excelled in whatever you chose at that point.
Oh, thank you. It's a little sexier, that beach volleyball, isn't it? Yeah.
I think cycling is sexy. That sort of mythology and imagery of the open road and just being able to get on your bike and go anywhere. I think that's actually really beautiful.
Yeah. It's still a vehicle, literally, to this day, for just kind of punching out from the craziness of life. I'll just grab the mountain bike and to go rip in the dirt, and just quite literally being able to move through space, move through the wind in your face and the air and the sky and the sun shining on you. And I love being outdoors. So it is a wonderful space to spend time that is available to really everyone. You know, it is something, I mean, almost everyone can pick up a bike and ride 5 miles, or, you know, and just find a bike path or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah. Increasingly rare also that we find activities that we cannot hold a phone in our hands for.
Yeah.
So there's that added benefit.
Yeah, I'm good at that though, girl. So people can learn. It's
Be
not
me.
good. I'm like, okay, yeah, But, you know, now with Bluetooth, could talk all day long. It's terrible. Don't do this at home.
Yes. You know, do as we say, not as we do. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Parenting 101. Do as I say, not as I do. You know, I love the idea that movement could help support you in your recovery journey, because I find that for a lot of us, you know, particularly women in our society, that movement is always sort of associated with aesthetics, right? We're driven to that, to quote unquote, get in shape. And I know that for me personally, something that dramatically changed my relationship to movement is when I started making the connection between movement for movement's sake, but also how good I felt, like how much better I felt mentally and emotionally simply because I moved my body. Like, what were the sort of tools or mindset shifts that you found occurred when you started just connecting to movement again, like just to move?
Yeah, that's such a good point. I always feel like I wish there was like a 24-hour pill that people that really never moved much and were completely out of shape could just take and just feel what it feels like for 24 hours, because you can't describe it. And you can't believe how good you feel if you're moving in some capacity every day, or at least, you know, 5 or 6 times a week. Because it's addictive, because feeling good is addictive, right? And then whatever it is that's making you feel so good, and a healthy good movement, as opposed to drugs or alcohol or something. But it was exactly the way that you are describing it in the beginning. It was just discovery and the wind in my face. I mean, I'm not kidding. Just, you know, I had been inside for a long time at that point, just not really willing to face the world. And so the sun, the wind, the elements, the salty air, just getting to breathe deeply and then very deeply as I started to kind of train and go, wow, this is really interesting journey that I feel like my body could maybe do. And it was such a joy. It was the joy the whole time. But then, of course, once I got to an elite level, like there's a whole many layers of stuff. I mean, even politics inside the Olympic committees that are just, you know, not fun every day. But in the beginning, and I feel like I'm back to that now, like not I'm not a professional athlete anymore, where it's just a joy. Like when I got home from the Olympics, the very first thing I did was rip all data machines off my bike, all computers, all power meters, all heart. Like I was like, I never want to be a number again to track my worth, because that's what we were doing. And it was legitimate. And I made it there with those devices. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to without them, but just getting back to that freedom of movement and that feeling every part of your body, you know, feeling lactic acid in your toes and feeling it in your arms and just being like, yes, I'm pushing, you know, I'm pushing myself, and this isn't comfortable. Right. And feeling that like exhilaration of, wow, most people spend their lives like fighting to just be comfortable all the time. And this feels really euphoric in a whole nother way that being comfortable doesn't give to you.
And that idea of challenging what you think is possible for yourself, because I think there's such an incredible liberation in thinking you're one thing and then having this evidence to the contrary, being like, wow, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I could take that on and make that happen. And like, you're like, oh, what else can I do? Like, bring it on.
Yes. I know. I climbed my mom wanted to climb a 14 of her 75th birthday. And so my sister and I went with her, and I mean, that was just extraordinary in itself, because those are beasts. So we were in Colorado and did it. And we saw a lady on there that, I mean, it's really hard to believe she was under 90. It's like, oh my God, like, Mom, whatever, 75, big deal. You know, it's just like, if you can dream it, you can probably do it. And you can, or at least you can attempt doing it and have a darn good time seeing if it's possible. And even if you get to a mile from the top or a half mile from the top, there aren't very many 90-year-olds on a 14er like being like, I'm going to try this. And that just alone is so satisfying, to come down and be 90, be like, oh, just got halfway up that thing. Or she probably made it. I mean, she probably made it. So it's just like, wow. Yeah. It's mental health, right? Like, I mean, it's just, at the end of the day, that's more now what I use it for. It's like the cheapest therapist on the planet Earth. Is to move,
100%.
right?
That's
Yeah.
exactly my,
Yeah.
that is exactly the sort of my mind view. I was like, this is like so much cheaper than the hundreds and thousands of hours of therapy that I would
Yes.
need
Yeah.
if I didn't go out for a run or like do this class. Also, therapy is important, but it saves on
You can
additional.
work through a lot though on a bike ride or in a yoga class. I mean, you know, just leave a little bit for the therapist. Just like, you know, just
Exactly.
1 or 2 sessions. You don't need 20.
Yeah, make a few more gains just to help your therapist along. Okay?
Exactly. You're welcome.
At what point did the switch flip for you that you were like, okay, so I enjoyed doing this, but maybe it's not just something I love. Like maybe I could actually compete.
I think my subconscious mind made the decision first, because when that happened, it was because I told a lie. I had fallen in love with it. Like I said, I had tried a few races, and it was obvious that there was some talent in there, you know, not like necessarily any high level, but some. And what I decided to do was leave a lucrative job and become a messenger in downtown LA, because I decided, okay, I live in Venice. It's 25 miles to downtown LA, obviously 25 miles back. If you messenger, I mean, back in the day when they needed messengers, so now I'm really dating myself. And it was about 10 miles, you know, or so. So I'm like, okay, if I can do 60 miles 5 days a week, that's really going to get some miles in my legs. Cause that's all I was hearing from people. You just need miles in your leg. You're starting really late, you know? And so that's what I went to get. And I was in the elevator of a skyscraper in downtown Los Angeles, where it's all law firms, right? Because that's basically all that you are delivering to. And I'm in there with a couple people, and they're asking about my cycling attire, right? Because I've got it all on. And I told them I was a professional cyclist, and I wasn't at all yet. And I got off the elevator and I thought, oh my God, I don't lie. What was that? I mean, when I was sick, I lied, but you know, I'm not, I don't think of myself as a liar. And so it was so shocking that came out of my mouth. And I was like, uh-oh, that's a dream. That's where I guess I think I want to go, because that's what just shot out of my mouth. And I think I wanted to, it must have been some kind of test to see what the reaction was, or if I could hold a straight face, or I don't know. I didn't think it through. It just literally came out of my mouth. So it was from that lie that I then had a desire to make it not a lie, because I was bummed that I just lied. It was really felt awful. And so then I charted the course towards it. You know, it's not like you're like, okay, now I'm going to be a professional. You know, it was more races. It was moving up in categories. It was understanding all the dynamics of cycling. It's pretty complicated. I always say it's like a chess match at, you know, 190 heart rate. And so it's just, I fell in love with so many aspects of it, including all the dynamics and all the tactics. And it just kept unfolding from there. And then I got a chance to go on a trip to race with the U.S. national team. And then from that point on, I really started catapulting forward. Although, you know, I was a domestique for a long time. I mean, one time in Italy, came in so at the end of the race that they had taken down the finish line.
Oh no.
Like the finish line. I mean, you know, so there were a lot of like ups and downs in there. It was not like, woo, shoot to the top from the elevator in downtown LA. But my director was calling local hospitals because he thought I had crashed and they hadn't seen me or something. And nothing had happened. I just was that slow compared to the pros. So it was a battle. the whole way, for sure. Like it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing that good and that juicy comes easily. But I also think that's
Yeah.
so helpful for people to hear, because life throws so many obstacles in your path. And sometimes, it can be the one where you're like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the sign. I'm no good at this. I shouldn't be doing this. And it's like, no, you went from not cycling at all to being so slow they removed the finish line to being on the podium at the Olympics, which is like pretty much the most incredible character arc I've ever heard.
Oh, thanks. It was a wild ride.
Yeah, I feel like we got to talk about plants now, because you started your cycling journey as an omnivore.
Yeah.
And then you switched to plant-based. Like, what sort of instance or experience, made you think, oh, all right, I don't think I'm going to eat this way anymore?
Yeah. Yeah, I sure did. I ate animals for 35 years of my life. I'm from the South, from Kentucky in the US. And it was, an animal was on every plate at every meal, and we did all the Southern things. It was the brisket and barbecue and fried chicken and, collard greens, but with a ham hock in the water. But, just everything had animal something in it. It was just what I knew, right? What we all knew. Just here we are. And at around 36, so I'm 10 years into just riding the bike and, I don't know, whatever, 7 or 6 years into doing it professionally. And, honestly, Desiree, I just came across what goes on behind closed doors to animals. And it just, it's sort of a long story there, but I had my eyes opened, and I was one of those personalities that I just couldn't see a little bit. I had to go down the rabbit hole and see a lot. Because when I first saw some footage, I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like this is what I said. I'm such an ass. Well, that must be footage from another country, because that doesn't happen here in the United States. Where the government protects and serves, and it should include our food system and our food sources. And it's like, oh my God, how naive was that? But I'm a few years out from Olympic Games at this point, but I have not made the team. Not at all. There's lots of women vying for those spots. And I just had a soul shift, as many of us have. That's the only way I can describe it. Soul shift. And then it's like, oh crap. Like, what I fuel myself with is fairly important to my career. This might be a problem, but I just said, that's it. I just was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not playing a party to it. I don't have anything to do with it. This is horrifying. And so I'm going to figure this out. And at that point, that's like 2009, 2010. And there wasn't much out there. Instagram wasn't even a thing yet. I just didn't really have access. I didn't realize that, there were a couple plant-based athletes, but they were men, like Brendan Brazier and Robert Cheek. And so I just didn't really know where to look, but I think I get frustrated now when people say it's so hard, because it's like, you gotta be kidding me. I didn't really even have any resources. I knew plants had protein because I knew a fair amount about nutrition from being an athlete, and I coached athletes for a long time too. So I knew a fair amount, and I knew they had protein. And so I just knew I just have to switch my protein sources out. It wasn't more complicated than that. I was like, oh, I can do that. I wasn't really counting calories. Sometimes I was counting macros, but as cyclists, you eat an exorbitant amount of calories. So that was, some days were 6,000, 7,000, depending on my workout. And I was only like a 140-pound athlete. So it's a lot of food. We would drink a lot of our food, because that's a lot of chewing. So I had, so then I just had to figure out like what to put in the shakes and what protein powders. I don't do protein powders anymore, but back then it's like you had to get the calories in, and you had to repair from the 3 workouts a day. So it was just uncovering where I'm going to find my protein sources. Luckily I did already love vegetables. I always loved big salads and truffles. So it wasn't like, oh God, I hate broccoli, or I hate, I loved all that stuff. So that part was easy. And I just sort of figured it out. It just, there was a nutritionist at the training center, the Olympic training center. But she was kind of like, I don't know about this. And that's sort of how everybody was. Nobody was rude and like, oh my God, you're going to die. But most of the coaches and stuff were like, oh, this is, I don't know, you're already kind of old and you're going to try and do this and you need to recover, because obviously that's what you're fighting against is, premium repair and recovery. The older you get, right? The young guns can do it in 10 minutes. And so they were really worried about my recovery. But anyway, I just did it. And I found it to be the exact opposite of what they had thought. I mean, it was like rocket fuel. It was like I was eating rocket fuel. It was just the coolest thing. And I guess I'm saying it was the coolest thing because I felt like I was now eating with my heart and my soul, and I was staying in alignment with what I believed. And if it had taken me down the wrong road and I hadn't made the Olympic team because I shriveled away, I felt okay with that. Like I had settled that, this is just going to be what it is because this is what I'm doing. But it had like the opposite effect. Like it repair in between workouts. When I got up in the morning, I started feeling spunky and bouncy. And I used to have a joke that I can't train before 10 because you were so hungover, right? A workout hangover, a training hangover feels just like an alcohol hangover, right? It's like you feel almost poisoned inside. Everything just hurts and aches and you're inflamed. And that's how I would wake up every morning. And I had to kind of like work through all that before I could go out and train again. That wasn't happening anymore. I was like popping out of bed. Like, I can get on the bike right now. Let's go. Let's get after it. It was crazy. It just, I wasn't expecting it. So I think that's why it was also so crazy. Like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. It's the opposite of what I thought. And I still get to eat with how I feel I want to eat and not to cause harm.
Which is so cool. And there's like so many things I want to unpack there. And I think, one area that I don't really do is performance nutrition. And so I'm always interested in seeing the perspectives of like sports dietitians. And there are some who seem not just like that they don't know about plant-based nutrition for performance, but like vehemently against plant-based nutrition. And part of me, my my inner knowing says it's simply because they don't know how to do it. And I think that your story, sort of speaks to this beautifully that, well, if you don't know how to take someone from an omnivore diet and transition them to like an equivocally nutritious diet, well, then, yeah, I guess I can see how you're like, no, you can't do this being vegan or plant-based. But, particularly around performance, one of the way that I got my start in nutrition, my first sort of like clinical love was anti-inflammatory nutrition. And like, I'm so passionate about plant-based diets for managing inflammation. And I watched, a few things, including your TEDx talk before we chatted. And you talked about the fact that like your recovery time was cut in half now that you were on plants, which is so cool and exactly what I would expect. So, I think it really sort of challenges this idea that, animal protein is the best protein for, supporting your immune system, for creating muscle gains.
Yeah. I think it's the folks they're scientists, dietitians, physicians, physiologists that say that plant-based, isn't a way to reach the top step of the podium and you can't do it. I think it's more personal than that. Scientists are also people, and I personally think they don't want to change. So they are just, they're going to do everything they can to dismantle this, whatever it is, right? Whether they think it's a craze or a fad or something, it's not, obviously. But I think it's more personal because we have enough data now.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's maybe 20 years ago. I mean, we had data then, but we don't have as much as we have now. And so if they are to look at the data, of course, there's always stuff coming out from the other side because they're fighting. Which is good. You know what I mean? We just saw that low fat dairy good for cardiovascular disease risk, but then you dig into the study and it's typical dairy funded overstatement, right? Really, if you so it's good to see them fight. It's good, it's like, yeah, you're not going to sustain for that much longer, but it's really just, I just started focusing and still do so much more on the micronutrients. I mean, I know that's what had me recovering in half the time and having me jump out of bed. It's not because I changed my protein source.
Yeah.
Like it's not the protein part, but that's what people think, right? Like that's what they're afraid of. It's like, no. Look at what is enhanced, right? And all of these new fruits and vegetables and herbs and spices and things that are going into my body because I'm excited about this journey and I want to see what all the flavors are. And that's what was doing it. And honestly, the more I went through it, the more I stopped like charting and counting everything. I mean, I knew my body and I knew, I know sadly from my anorexic days, how many calories are in every food on planet Earth. So, but I kind of got away from charting like I did as an omnivore. It was weird. Like that last year leading into Olympics and today, I mean, I don't look at anything today, numbers wise, right? Yeah. It was just kind of like, I don't really need to stare at that. I can literally experience a feeling after a meal that you cannot do on meat and dairy. I'm sorry, because you feel like shit after, you feel better later, than you did. But right after you eat it, you're like, I need a nap. But after a plant-based meal, as it starts to digest, I could go on a brisk walk or, like it was like I didn't need to go take a nap. So it's like I just started really listening to my body and really paying attention. And that told me what to eat. What I was craving is what I would eat, quite frankly. Yeah.
Which is so incredible. And I think that really speaks to the power of plant foods, particularly around inflammation. Like plant foods have these incredible phytochemicals that are actually squelching oxidative damage, like stopping inflammation in its tracks. And that's what you want. And I think, we're always so hung up on this protein question, but protein doesn't get absorbed in, like your body isn't like, hey, that's beef protein. Hey, that's lentil protein. Your digestive tract is breaking it down into amino acids and your body has no idea where those amino acids came from. It's like, did I get the amino acids I need? Good. I don't care where you got them.
Right. And now I will build muscle. Acids. Go about your day. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's so interesting when you think about how much has changed in terms of the science and how there are so many more health professionals and performance professionals who understand that plant-based nutrition is really such a gift for performance. But you, as part of your work with Switch for Good, in my inbox, I got the Let the Plant-Based Games Begin resource, which blew me away, especially as a dietitian who A, is super nerdy, likes research, but B, this isn't my area. And I was so blown away because it's like 100 pages of information, like all of the science on exactly like every level of performance, and then even getting into meal plan, like very specific meal plans. And I thought, if I'm a young athlete and I want to be plant-based and I'm not being supported in my choices, like what a gift a resource like this is. I'm going to link it in the show notes because you've given it away free for everybody, which I think is incredible. But like, like how did that resource come about?
Thank you so much. That just means so much to me because it took a year, a little over. I mean, it's a beast. It was a beast, but I get asked the questions on plant-based nutrition and performance like you do constantly. And I just started wondering a couple of years ago if there was a resource that was built that could help athletes, trainers, coaches, physiologists, dietitians inside of major league ball sports teams, even universities, colleges, and inside the Olympic committees. There's 206 Olympic teams around the world. And inside of those Olympic teams, I just got to tell you, it's the good old boys club. It has been for a long time, and it's starting to change. But there's a lot of men with guts who, sorry, but it's true, who are like, oh no, plants will kill you. Don't do it. Like you might die. Literally, that's what they say. I mean, I had a few say that to me. That were part of other sports, not cycling. I'll say that, but at the Olympic training centers, like, what are you eating? So it's unless they have a resource like this to be able to hand to the athletes and say, I don't know if it'll kill you or not, but here's the science and here's how to do it if you desire. Because what we're starting to see happen is so many more athletes are asking this question because we're seeing so many more athletes at a high level kind of slipping out that they're plant-based. It's like they're the big ones, right? Best soccer players in the world, best race car drivers in the world. I mean, sports that take a lot to perform. And so I said, we've got to have a resource because then maybe they won't tell athletes no. they'll just say, I don't know, or, they'll pretend like they know, be like, oh, here's this, whatever they want to do, but those resource. So I called the International Olympic Committee and just asked if they had anything like this. I felt like if they did, I would have seen it, and they didn't. So I ended up consulting with, interestingly enough, the staff inside the sustainability department at the IOC, because they were the ones that were like really excited to see this done, So we worked on it. We had Zoom calls every other week for like a year, and we just kept working on it, and more science, and the authors that are in it, they're just astounding and incredible in their fields, and specifically in performance and diet. So we created it, but out of need. There just wasn't anything like it, and so we've delivered it to the 206 Olympic teams from around the world, and it's going well. I mean, it's not. You think all 206 are going to be like, this is amazing. So not that yet, but a lot of them are really pumped and are going to dive in it over the holidays. Like you said, it's 100 pages, so it's not just like a brief that you can look at and make a decision. But we're going to be on top of it, all next year, really, really pushing it and just allowing people to understand that this is resources available. And after you finish it, there's just not really any argument that it can be great for athletes, plants. And then, if you so desire or want to have fun trying it, right? Like you said, we've got a tools section in the last section that really takes people through what it looks like. Because athletes are used to, as you well know, being very religious and very specific about what goes in their mouth. So we've got these, the meal plans with every macro, micro calorie that's ever, so that they can see, okay, no, this looks similar to what I was doing. It's just different food selections. Yeah.
Well, and it's something I'm so passionate about, this access to information, because not everyone has access to like high level professionals who can walk them through this. Like even in my own areas, like gut health, like not everyone has a really awesome gut health dietitian on their side. And, when you can put that information out, even if it's not enough to individualize to them, it's enough to start the conversation. It's enough for them to go back to the professionals they do have on deck and be like, look, I have this information. Like, what can we do with this? Can we move forward with this? And, it helps sort of spark change.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's very, very well put and so true. Just that spark, right? Yeah, because not everybody is going to go in hook, line, and sinker, right? But if there's a spark and in some intrigue, it can even hit them a year after the spark or the intrigue, but that's okay. That's okay. Maybe something happens with their health and they're like, I need to feel better. You know what I mean? I can't keep this up. And then that's the spark.
Yeah. And I think especially as we get older too, the benefits of the plant-based diet like only grow because of the way it contributes, the micronutrients, the phytonutrients, just to ensuring that all the sort of like regular cleanup and garbage processing that our bodies do on a daily basis work better. Like you stepped onto that Olympic podium, like just shy of your 40th birthday, which is such an incredible accomplishment, because I think it just shows that with the right perseverance and sort of like the right training, but also the right nutrition on deck, like you really can do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And the heart that's willing to go there. Right. And do the work. But no, it's true. And it's just one story, which is why one of the reasons we wanted to create the playbook, to have the science, because there's a lot of athletes, but it's just one story. And that's what you hear a lot. Like, oh, that's anecdotal. Well, there's a lot of anecdotals out there. We're like, okay, you might want to look into this, right?
Yeah, there definitely is now. Okay, so I want to ask, especially because you said you didn't think too much about your nutrition. Like, what's the role of supplements in your life? Like, what's the role of supplements in your life, like now versus then? Like, is it something, we're all taking B12, but like what else is sort of on your shelf?
Yeah. For me, nothing besides that. When I was an athlete, I took the same stuff I took as an omnivore, as a plant. Like I didn't change anything. I had some iron deficiencies when I first started, but I think it was from my eating disorder, because it got better and better. So I was taking iron and D, and I was doing a lot of protein powders, like I mentioned, just because you get tired of chewing, and that's not true. I was not taking a B12 as an omnivore, and I started. But now, you know, and I played around with BCAAs, and I mean, you know, there's different supplements at different times that I was taking, whether it was in season or off season, but nothing to do with my plant-based diet. That's just was, you know, a supplement regimen. I didn't do well on the BCAAs. They always made me, I felt like they made me create more lactic acid, like my legs burned with so I just, it's like, I don't need it. I just from food. I never messed around with creatine or any of that stuff as an endurance athlete, because that's a slippery slope. Maybe good for bodybuilders, but so I was never like a big supplement person in general. Nowadays, this is interesting. I always suggest to people where it's like, oh, plant-based diet. Okay. What supplements? And you're like, no. Go get a blood test, please. Right. Because I had pretty high iron, very high ferritin, for people that don't know, your iron storage, like 5 years ago or so, the last time I got a blood test. And I mean, I was on a plant-based diet. I had been on one for 7 or 8 years by that point. And so it is, and you can tell me if you think this is different, but, it is more dangerous to have high iron because it oxidizes in your system than slightly low iron, right? Like you don't want to just jack iron up if you don't have an iron deficiency. So that's really important. But my D was great. Iron great, a little high, and I wasn't even taking it. And so I just still do a B12 as long as my blood tests look great, which I need to get another one. Thank you for the reminder. I should get them every year, but I tend to get them every couple. Yeah, I just don't. I mean, I'm just getting it through food. Obviously, my blood looks like it did when I was an Olympic athlete. I mean, it just is it's a great blood panel. So that's where I am. I mean, I just don't. Yeah, I know some people take a multi as an insurance policy, and if my blood values change as I age, I will, but I'm not right now.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important point too, because there's a lot of people who assume if they go vegetarian or vegan that they're going to become anemic. And
It's
while
crazy.
theoretically this group is more at risk for anemia, it all comes down to, are you putting that iron in your body?
Right.
And so, you know, in practice, we see a lot of people who go plant-based by simply removing the animal products and forgetting that you need to put something back. It's a swap. It's not a remove.
Yeah.
And so if you're like, oh, well, I used to put like ground beef in my spaghetti and I'll just remove it. And it's like, no. So now we put the lentils or we put some like Beyond Meat.
Great point.
You have to
That's
put
exactly
something
what's
back
happening.
that replaces those nutrients. And absolutely in our practice, again, very anecdotal, but like over a decade in practice, I would say that the vast majority of the clients who did come to us with anemia were not plant-based.
Yeah.
You know, anemia occurs in people who consume red meat all the time, and iron is so regulation is so complex in our body. And if we consume a lot of iron transporters actually are decreased. And so you absorb less the more that you take. But as you said too, particularly from my sort of like space of gut health, taking a lot of iron and getting a lot of heme iron in particular is a gut irritant. It is a pro-inflammatory force in the gut. And considering how much inflammation can be initiated in the gut space because so much of our immune system is there, it's about getting right amount of iron, not just getting like all the iron.
Yeah, that's so well said. And plant foods are only non-heme, the way I understand it, right? So it's so get a blood test. Like don't just start jamming it down your throat, people,
and I didn't go to school that long ago, but even still, like I was taught that heme iron was the quote unquote good iron.
I know.
And that plant-based iron was, you know, sort of like inefficient for maintaining your iron status. And I think as the research accumulates, we're going to see that's very much not true.
Yeah. It's such a good point, because I get a lot of the supplement question. It's almost like there's this assumption or something. And I think the other side has tried to make that be the case, where it's like, oh, if you eat plants, you're going to need supplements. And you're like, plants are literally the supplements we take. I mean, they're literally filled with D and E and C and A and all it's like, what? Whereas dead meat is not filled with all of those, some, but not all. Yeah.
Yeah. The closest thing we have to a magic pill is putting a bunch of whole plant foods on your plate. Like,
right. Yes. This is so true. Like the kale that I started this podcast with, all in between my teeth, just like giant amounts. I don't know. You got it. That's the other thing. I was going to talk about taste and flavor, and because people go, oh God, a bowl of kale or whatever. You know, I sauteed it and it's got a little, you know, I've got some onions in there and fun things. But I think you feel like there's not going to be, you know, any real flavor, but your taste buds change dramatically when you get rid of that meat and dairy. I completely lost my sweet tooth. It was weird. I didn't have a huge one, but I had a good sweet tooth. Like I had a little something sweet every night, and it's gone. Like I have no sweet tooth, and it's like I crave the base foods as opposed to acidic foods. And it's just, I can, my husband's plant-based, but he can't eat quite the size like greens I can, you know, it's just, I just crave like, I think it's because I feel so good. So then your body and your mind start communicating. It's like, oh, go get that. That makes you feel better. And it's just, it's filling to me, and it's delicious. And it's like, I get so much energy from it. And it's like, you know that, and it's, I don't know, it's just a completely, because I liked greens before, like I mentioned, but not at this this amount or this level. But it really just, everything works better. Your digestion system, the whole system, right? Like just everything, it just works every day. There's no, and it didn't always work, even when I was younger, you know, not all the time.
I call greens the gateway drug to a healthier life, because I do exactly what you just said. I feel like when you eat greens on a daily basis, like you really do feel the difference. It's one of those foods, like other things, you're like, well, yeah, it's great, it's healthy, I'm nourished. But like you eat greens and you're like, whoa, yeah, okay, I'm liking this. I feel amazing. I actually have this thing called the Daily 3, and it's omega-3 rich seeds, legumes, and greens, because I feel like those are the foods we don't eat enough of. And also those are the foods that when you really commit to them, you're like, oh, I get what this plant thing is about. Like I feel awesome.
I know. That's what this was kale and garbanzo beans. There's like 2 bites left, and hemp seeds. So I got your 3.
Yes. That's amazing. Daily 3 in one bowl. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The beans make you feel full for a long time. So people that feel like I'm hungry all the time, whether you're omnivore or plant-based, oh my gosh, those legumes, they're so satiating. And then I won't be hungry for 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely when you eat this way, it's so disappointing to not be full after a meal. Like if you go out and you're eating something that's like, you know, maybe not as fibrous, and you're like, oh, I don't feel as full as like when I make dinner at home, and you're just like, yes, I feel like full and satisfied. Like I've been fed.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's so true. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit just about Switch for Good, and then I've got my rapid fire questions for you. But,
okay.
You know, when you transitioned away from competitive cycling, you started Switch for Good. I mean, you also have like a documentary about your story. You were also part of Game Changers documentary. I feel like everyone has seen Game Changers and has been so inspiring for so many people. But you started Switch for Good, which is an advocacy group.
Yeah.
To sort of share the science and the ethics and the environmental impact of the dairy industry. What inspired you to go into a nonprofit? Because that is absolutely not the like plushiest thing you could do with your career.
Thank you. That's so true. As we're end of year and I'm begging people for money. Gosh, I stepped off the Olympic podium and I was pretty much like, I'm done, right? Like I'm not going to do this again. But then I did have a brief comeback in 2014, which we won't discuss, but I decided no, I didn't want to go in that direction. And so I was just kind of on fire for, just the movement in general. I think, you know, just like standing up for the voiceless, and I just had that fire. So I was just doing a lot of volunteering for different organizations. I mean, I was like leafletting and, you know, speaking and just anything I could help with. And in 2018, I saw this commercial, which I had seen commercials like it many, many times, but it was on the closing ceremonies, or sorry, it was on the opening ceremonies of the 2018 Olympic Games. And as many people know, milk sponsors athletes. As many people don't know, milk is also the title sponsor of the United States Olympic Committee. New Zealand and the United States are the only 2 countries in the world that are not government-funded Olympic teams. So they have to go out and get private sponsors. So they have milk as their title sponsor, and they did for the whole time I was racing. And so, I mean, the cafeterias are inundated with dairy. It's like there's a cow in the freaking kitchen. It's so gross. There's just the recovery bar, because they had that open 24 hours a day. And back in the day, it was just all dairy. It was whey protein and cottage cheese, as disgusting as that is. What is that? I don't and obviously milk and yogurt, and it was just like a dairy machine. I'm positive they have some plant protein on that recovery bar now, but so it was just fed to us. And once I uncovered what a lie was being fed to us, and I started to uncover how horrid it is for the digestive systems of mostly people of color. And I'm thinking, this is freaking racist. They're pushing this on all of us athletes, when it really only works for some white people. It just got me angry. So I see this dairy commercial, and they're using this Olympic athlete who's a wonderful Olympic athlete. And it's kind of this 30-second story between her and her mother encouraging her when she was a little girl. Well, it's not lost on you and me that you are using a mother and a daughter in the dairy with the mother and it's like, that just set me off. I mean, I was just fired up. I said, I saw it. My husband's sitting there. I said, somebody has got to say something. This is insane that this shit is still on TV and that they're peddling this lie. Like, it's like tobacco. You know what I mean? It took years. They lied for years. It was over 500 studies had to come out before they finally said, oh, yeah, well, nicotine's addictive and, smoking can kill you. I mean, they covered it up, which dairy has been doing. And I just went on a rampage, and he just looked at me and he's like, well, I think that person might be you. Because I'm not hearing anyone else freak out about this. So that was the fire starter for me. And so inside 3 weeks, I got together 6 athletes from 4 different countries, producers, funders, and we ended up putting a commercial on the closing ceremonies of that Olympic Games on NBC that said, basically, it was a 30-second PSA, but I mean, it's online, but dairy foods is not what we need to win Olympic medals. I mean, what a joke of a statement. So that Switch for Good actually got started. The name itself was because we did this PSA, and then, 2 days before we turned it in, we're like, oh crap, we have to say something at the end of this PSA. Like, what are we going to say? Where are we going to send people?
Action.
Call action.
What do we do?
Exactly. So the brilliant marketers were like, Switch for Good. And we're like, oh, that's so positive. Sure. So that was what on the end of the commercials. And then that was, to me, it was, that it's like, oh, we fought back. And then we kind of come back together as a group, like a couple weeks later, because it's a lot. The dairy industry ended up getting it kicked off of NBC. It played in 2 cities. It was supposed to play in 6. Like, we're having this huge party. It doesn't play because they've called NBC. I mean, it's just gross, like follow the dollar. But anyway, couple weeks later, we got together and it kind of, we just all sort of realized that there was a space for something like Switch for Good in this movement. Nobody was doing exactly that. No one was unraveling the lies of dairy specifically, or really just sharing anything about it, what it has to do with, like you said, of course, the environment and the animals and the health, but also the food justice aspect. Huge food injustice aspect. And we work on that a lot on a governmental federal level here in the US. So we just kind of got rolling, and I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I didn't know how to lead a nonprofit. I still not totally sure what I'm doing, but we're almost 5 years old. So here we are. And it's, at this point, it's a lot of fun, and it's really rewarding, and it feels good to wake up every day and know that I'm fighting for something I believe in deeply. So yeah. I think the team,
and that your actions are in line with your values and the vision that you want to have for the world. It's so incredibly inspiring. Okay, so it's time to switch for the rapid fire, which I ask every guest.
Okay.
They're always a surprise, but I call all of them softballs, and sometimes people are like, oh, that's a really hard question. But they're softballs. So.
Great. I can't wait.
It's more that sort of like senior moment when I was like, oh, what did I read this year? Your least favorite training exercise when you were in competition mode, like the one you're just like, oh, I hate this one.
It's probably the inverted leg sled. I mean, I learned to love it because it was effective, but it was extremely, extremely painful. And I would not look forward to going to that. It was like a beast of a machine that you just look at and you're just, oh yeah, that I don't do that anymore. on purpose.
Like, I don't want to get in there anymore.
Yeah. I lifted a lot of weight, and it was just never fun, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. The best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Stay curious.
Mm.
That really sunk in, and I've used it for years now. Yeah. I mean, it sounds simple, but if you really break it down and you start implementing, it's not simple, and it's awesome.
Yeah. That's actually incredible. I love that. Okay. Your favorite comfort food?
French fries, but I eat them more than I should. And I don't know that they're for comfort. I just like them. Yeah.
Happy is a very comfortable state.
Exactly. I love potatoes a lot. Like a lot. So yes, in any form, really.
Yeah. Potatoes are highly underrated as a food and as a lifestyle. I absolutely feel like potatoes are a lifestyle.
I know. They should get more press.
Yeah. You get 20 minutes all to yourself. You are not allowed to be productive. You can't get housework done. You can't get work done. What do you do?
Hike with my dog, Chula.
Yeah.
For sure. That's my escape every day.
Love that. And then finally, the condiment or spice you can't live without, because everybody thinks vegan food is like, meh, but vegan food is super flavorful. You just got to know your arsenal of spices.
Yeah. I mean, nooch, but like I really love spicy paprika and cumin, like on tofu so much, those two together, and then like fresh garlic. I mean, you can't ask a plant-based person to pick one. There's just like, because I didn't know about any of these spices before. I mean, I probably knew 3 spices: salt, pepper, and garlic, I think, before I went plant-based. But gosh, yeah. I mean, but I think nooch, because I not only like the flavor, but the feeling of it. Like the tactile, it's like I like it on pasta and salads and soups and just so many different things. And my friend makes a nooch that's like, it has nooch, but it also has raw ground up cashews, garlic powder, and sea salt. So it's like nooch on steroids. It's crazy. It's crazy good. And she sends it to me, and then I run out, and then I'm like, don't send it. Cause it's like, you can't eat cashews all day long, right? You're going to blow up. So it's like, but that is like, whoa, it's like crack.
I would put that on everything. That sounds
everything. Yeah. Bagels, sandwiches. I mean, it's gone quite quickly. So that's a good idea for people.
Dotsie, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me here on the All Sorts podcast. I think that people are going to be so inspired by all that you've accomplished. And for the athletes listening to this, the resource that you've shared, let the plant-based games begin. Apparently it's late in the day, or I need more coffee, or both. It's going to be so helpful, because it's just going to open a whole world of research and opportunities for them that they might not have had access to otherwise. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. I respect you so much, and I'm a big fan of yours. And yeah, this has been a joy to have this conversation.